Impact segment tonight, politics in the Boston terrorist situation. That is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. Even while the two suspects were at large, people like Barney Frank were politicizing the Boston terror bombing. And incredibly, some in the press were doing that as well.
I send my deepest condolence to the victims and families in Boston. President Obama said that what happened in Boston was an act of terrorism. I would like to ask, do you consider the U.S. bombing on civilians in Afghanistan earlier this month that left 11 children and a woman killed a form of terrorism? Why or why not?
Well, I would have to know more about the incident, and obviously the Department of Defense would have answers to your questions on this matter.
Here's how ridiculous that question really is. The USA is fighting a war in Afghanistan. In every war, collateral damage happens. Civilians are killed. There's no way to prevent it. It is not U.S. policy to target civilians in Afghanistan. In fact, we go out of our way not to. Everybody knows that. Yet this woman has the nerve at a White House press conference to equate military battlefield action with the bombing of civilians in Boston. Very disturbing. But here's something even more provocative. Former NBC News anchor Tom Brokaw apparently putting some of the motivation for the Boston bombings on his own country.
I think we also have to examine the use of drones that the United States is involved in. And there are a lot of civilians who are innocently killed in a drone attack in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, and in Iraq. And I can tell you, having spent a lot of time over there, young people will come up to me on the streets and say, we love America, but if you harm one hair on the head of my sister, I will fight you forever. And there is this enormous rage against what they see in that part of the world as a presumptionist of the United States.
So let me get this straight, Tom. We shouldn't use drones to attack al-Qaeda leadership or Taliban terrorists hiding in the mountains of Pakistan. We shouldn't do that. So how exactly would you fight the war against terrorism, Tom? You want to invade Pakistan? Is that what you want to do? Or do you want to sit back and let terrorists hatch their plots and watch Americans die at home and on the battlefield? It's either or, Tom, either or, one or the other. I challenge you to come on this broadcast and answer that question. Of course, Tom Brokaw will not do that. Much too difficult. And he wouldn't associate with the peasants here on the factory. No, he's up here. Drives me crazy. This stuff really makes me angry. Now, it is worth noting that during World War II, the USA did target civilians in Japan and Germany. It did what it had to do to win the war and to deal with Tojo and the Nazis. But now we have a cadre of Americans who, for some reason, don't feel that the USA has a right to defend itself. Every decent person laments civilian casualties anywhere. But again, in war, they happen. So it's time to knock off the nonsense. The war on terrorism is real. The dead and wounded in Boston are real. And this ridiculous left-wing moral equivalency is insulting. And that's the memo. Now reaction. Joining us from Washington, Mary Catherine Ham and Juan Williams. All right, Juan, where am I going wrong, man?
I hate to upset you, but you're right. You know, I don't understand what they're talking about. I mean, to me, there's a big difference between an act of terror, Bill, which is what happened in Boston, and an act of war, which is when the U.S. uses drones to go after people that are, in fact, engaging in terrorism and trying to hatch plots to kill us. I don't get it, but here's the thing. Some of these terrorists, in fact, insinuate themselves into communities, hoping that then the United States will not act, will not go after them. And, in fact, you know, this is the truth. The Defense Department, the Pentagon, makes an effort to avoid any injury to civilians. This is not casual. They will avoid targeting people.
And Americans have been killed because...
And there's no acknowledgement of that. Now, I will say this for Brokaw.
But it's worse than that, Juan. Mary Catherine, you know Brokaw, do you know who he is?
Yeah.
He wrote a book, The Greatest Generation, right?
Yes.
About World War II and how great the Americans performed during World War II. Hey, Tom, did you ever hear of Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Dresden? All right? How about that, Tom? You know, Japanese weren't too thrilled when they seen hundreds of thousands of their people dying, all civilians. But no, you see, he's just so politically correct. Oh, the drones, you know? Oh, no. they'll hate us. Then what do you do?
Right.
It's so irresponsible. Then
Well,
what do you do, Brokaw?
Right. Well, here's the thing that bothers me is that the path they're going down is not just to make this horrible moral equivalency argument, which you're right to refute, but it's also to consider the grievances of those who are killing 8-year-olds in the street with bombs. And I don't think that you get to have your political grievances discussed at that point. Not if you're Chris Dorner, the cop killer out in California, not if you're Timothy McVeigh, and not if you're these guys. And so we shouldn't use that as a pivot point to discuss actual serious policy discussions. The drone debate we've been having for a little while. I think Rand Paul was right to raise some questions about it. We can continue to have that debate, but this should not be the pivot point, and we should not also let them intimidate us from discussing it.
And here's what Carney should have done to that ridiculous woman. So are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, he's a man of the left.
You're making a comparison between what happened in Boston to Afghanistan, to drones? Is that what you're doing, lady? And you know what, Juan? President Obama has not used the term Muslim terrorism in the whole Boston incident. Hasn't used it.
Well, we don't know that.
Yes, we do. He hasn't used
Muslim terrorism. I think they're not. Most Chechens are not Muslims.
They
Yes,
are.
they are. Yeah, they are.
No.
But they're also separatists.
Any of the reportage about the guy on social media putting all of his stuff about jihad on there? Don't you know that one?
No, I know that, but I'm saying, look.
Well, what do you think it is?
I don't know if it's Muslim terrorism. Let him prove it. But let me just say, it's terrorism. I don't care where it came from.
No, you have to care where it came from. If it came from Ireland, it's IRA
but
terrorism.
I'm not going to leap. You shouldn't leap, and I shouldn't leap to blaming Muslims. That's
what he
crazy.
said.
We're happy to leap when it's somebody. Look, everybody in the media is happy to leap to conclusions when they think it might be somebody right of center. That's why they were all hypothesizing about tax day all day long. I'm happy to have a moratorium on waiting to jump to conclusions. We just don't get that in all of the situations. We only get that when the guy in question has all these YouTube links going to Al Qaeda and other extremist imams.
Yeah, I mean, Juan, you need to read what this guy posted on social media. I gotta go.
No.
I gotta go.
I've seen it. I just want to be very sure before I leave. Now, let me just say one last thing, Bill. You were right to say to Brokaw, do you want us to send troops over there? Because more people, more civilians will die if American troops have to invade.
All right.
I don't understand why they don't see that.
I want you to do me a favor, Mary Catherine, all right?
Will do.
I want you to go to Tom Brokaw's house and get him on a program.
Okay, all right. I'll see what I can do for you.